argument in the appeal. Arms and Nottinghamshire County Council.
Lord Reid will summarise the judgment.
The appellant in this case spent most of her childhood in local authority care. The council placed her with foster parents who subjected her to physical and sexual abuse. The issue in the appeal is whether the council is liable to her in damages for the wrongs committed against her by the foster parents. The decision in the appeal will affect other people who are abused in foster care, subject to any differences in the legislation and practice at the relevant time. It is not suggested that the council itself was at fault. The appellant relies on a legal principle known as vicarious liability. Where that principle applies, one person can be liable for wrongful behaviour by another person. The most familiar example is the liability of employers for wrongs committed by their employees. So if the appellant had been placed by the local authority in one of its children's homes and had been abused by a member of staff there is no doubt that the local authority would have been liable. It's well established that vicarious liability is not confined to employers and employees. The relevant factors have been held to be whether the wrong was committed in the course of an activity undertaken by the wrongdoer on behalf of the defendant, whether the activity being undertaken by the wrongdoer formed part of the defendant's activities, whether the defendant, by having the wrongdoer carry out the activity in question, created or increased the risk of a wrongful behaviour, whether the wrongdoer was to some degree under the control of the defendant, and whether the defendant is more likely to be able to compensate the victim of the wrongdoing than the wrongdoer himself. Applying those factors, the judge dismissed the appellant's case and the Court of Appeal upheld his decision. They considered that the activity being carried on by the foster parents was bringing up the child in their family, and that was not an activity of a local authority or one that was subject to the local authority's control. By a majority of 4-1, this court allows the appellant's appeal against that decision. Under the legislation in force at the relevant time, the council had a statutory duty to provide accommodation and maintenance for the children in its care. It could discharge that duty by placing children in a children's home or by placing them with foster parents. In most cases, it quite properly preferred to place them with foster parents, as that was likely to be better for the child. So it recruited people who were willing to act as foster parents, selected them, trained them, inspected their homes, and then placed children with them who were suitable for their skills and experience, as a way of discharging its own duty to care for the children. The council's social workers regularly visited the foster parents' home, monitored their care of the children, and assessed how they were coping and whether they required further support or training. They could remove the children from the foster parents' care at any time. The social workers also involved foster parents in decision-making concerning the children and used them as a source of information about the children. The council retained parental powers in relation to the children and so were responsible for a number of aspects of their care, such as consenting to medical treatment, deciding on contact with the children's birth families, and authorising school trips, overnight stays, and holidays. The council also paid allowances to the foster parents and provided them with any equipment which they might need in order to care for the children. In these circumstances, the majority of the court consider that the foster parents were undertaking an activity on behalf of the council, which formed an integral part of its organisation of its childcare services. The council's placement of children with foster parents, with the result that they could be alone with the children unsupervised, also involved a risk of abuse. The council exercised a degree of control over the foster parents through the monitoring carried out by social workers, and it's not essential that any closer degree of control should exist in order for vicarious liability to be imposed. Health authorities, for example, are liable for negligence by surgeons, although the authorities do not supervise the surgeons when they are operating. The council are also in a better position to meet an award of damages than the foster parents. For these reasons, the court concludes that the council are liable for the harm which the appellant suffered at the hands of the foster parents, whom it had recruited and engaged to look after her. The next stage in the case will be for damages to be assessed.